right, welcome back to the Lost Info podcast. As always, it's keeping you awake, Jake
and Jake.
All righty, so some quick updates. We had some difficulties with this last one. It'll be up before you probably hear this one, but with Dr. Pam Popper, Jacob couldn't make it on that one. But we were getting some things from YouTube. We're gonna finally update this website, and we're gonna have a different video platform that you'll be able to get so that you can see the interviews and things like that in case YouTube ends up doing this basically annihilation of First Amendment. Because I don't know what's going on, but we've went through a couple appeals on cases, and again, on our topics, we only talk about what is already out there, and then we give our own opinion. We don't really force opinions on anybody. You can make your own. So that part's kind of pissing me off, because in everything we kind of always stayed true to that. Yes, we might be vocal on our own opinion, but that is the right to do, as far as I know, or as far as it should be.
Right.
So, and you can take all the information, and again, pound search it. It's not that button. But they were applauding for, but you can pound search it, which is that button, and that means go look it up for yourself, make your own informed decision. Which we always try to say, which anyway, like I said, we'll have a different video platform so that you can make sure that you see these interviews and things like that. And then we're, the audio side of it, they're never really flagged. It's still just, those platforms aren't really being taken over that way, and they still let you say whatever you want to say. So as far as that is, that's good. The other update, if you want to help us out, we're going to try to do more ads and whatever else for the kids book. And then we still have to write the second and third one for the series, but they will enter you in a drawing to be able to go to a place to do a live topic, and it helps the podcast out. We'll put all that up on the website when it's updated. And then hopefully, I know I said this the last one before, but hopefully we'll be into the new studio on the next case file. It's very close. We're just got to do some custom builds on the desk and whatever else, and some paint, and we're there. So we're very excited to move into our new home, where we can bring you a lot more content and fun and topics and interviews. And with that all being said, we are going to move right into this case file, which is case file, the Philadelphia experiment. Heavily requested. It's a very fun topic to talk about. Me and Jacob both mentioned that there's not a ton of documented evidence. I mean, but let's just say, for example, 9/11, there's plenty of evidence per se that you can see, that you can look through, that you can find, that raises questions, and something, you know, definitely wasn't up to par on it. This one, being that it was in the 40s, there's just not a whole lot of documented anything. And then you find out the people that really were getting into it or saw it, that, I mean, all either been silenced or recanted their testimony, and then came back out and said it was true again. So I think there was a lot of intimidation on some of this stuff. And obviously, to me, I think a lot of power being pushed around, being, don't talk about this. First of all, we don't really even get the Philadelphia experiment by somebody's fictional thing. Like, something happened, whether to the extent, I don't know.
Right.
But there's something. The story came from somewhere, and it's
Absolutely.
not just a fiction book or somebody's letters. This that we'll get into later. This Carlos Alianda or whatever, but
Carlos Montalban.
Wait, Carlos Alianda. But his individual letters wouldn't created the, I don't know, whole sensation
right.
that it is, because it's talked about in many different levels in you know, film, in podcasts, in military. I mean, like, it's something happened. They tried something, And I think it got squirrely. And then they realized that they were possibly onto a new technology. And they were like, hey, we actually have to now make sure that this doesn't get out to either continue testing or to not let anybody know, maybe like Russians or whatever else, that they had stumbled onto something of this nature. Is my take. We'll get into that on the off the fence, but it does become weird because I've went down a lot of, listening on people weighing in on this topic, and for whatever reason, being that there is no documented trail per se of evidence, it's quickly written off, and I just I don't see that. I don't see this like just a made up story that grew roots and like held on this long and took the, I don't know, the whole entire story to the extent that it's, a movie. And like, just like we've said before, Hollywood always gives you a little bit here and there of things that are going on. And the film didn't even come out till way after, but it's just like, there's enough that something happened. It's just to what extent, I guess, for me. But anyway, is there anything you want to add before we get popping off on the?
Let's get into it.
All right. Well, so this one involves the USS Eldridge in the summer of 1943. This was a battleship, basically a destroyer, which was brand new at the time. And the legend or the story has it that they were going to create a cloaking device. And basically it was for like, I think it was the U-boats, right, Germany, that were basically taking down massive destroyers. Pound search that. That's actually a fun topic to look up to. Those U-boats were crazy, man. They were a game changer. So they were trying to come up with ideas on how to either build new boats that were more maneuverable with the U-boat, or cloak it to where it became invisible
to the missiles and torpedoes.
Yeah. Well, and I think that now that can be misconstrued too, because they could have meant invisible by radar,
right,
or invisible completely
to the naked eye.
Yeah. So, or both. So that part wasn't very clear either. But however, I think what we're looking at, and I think they actually do that. I don't remember what it's called. You can pound search it, but I do believe they do that on naval ships or submarines, that they put this electrical charge in them, so
that's exactly, it's a magnetic. I think that's that you block the magnetic.
Yeah, for like mines and stuff like that.
Yep.
So that is a thing. So I guess like the wording on it gets a little weird. But this story, again, has different roots of different accounts. I mean, not many people got to really tell the story, or at least the ones that were, I don't know. So we're looking back in 1940s. I mean, just think about people that were being silenced on UFO topics and whatever else, Men in Black coming around. For whatever reason, they didn't talk much about them, and then they'd always recant their story. So I think the same kind of, especially if this was military, same kind of thing would be deployed, is to hush everybody as fast as possible. And since there isn't a lot of media, I mean, you'd have to have people doing like actual journalism and research to go find this stuff. And then, redacted documents, or not even making documents based on their findings. It would have been hard to find any kind of evidence or people that would even speak up against this, that it may have saw it. And, again, we'll get into that Carlos Alianda, which his letters is what led to a journalist and writer to write the books about it and get it going. But then he had realized, now a lot of people say that when people started making money on the topic, he came out and said what he said was all fake and false. And then basically nobody changed, and still was writing on the topic and stories and movies and whatever else, and books and documentaries and whatever else. So then he came back and said that it was true, that everything he had wrote about was fact. So I don't know, that part I think is, again, it's a lot of the technique that I think our government does, is muddy the waters. And they probably threatened him, and then other things were coming out, and they couldn't threaten everybody. And then he was like, well, fuck it, if everybody else can still talk about it, I'm going to go back to my original statement, which was that I did see this, and this is what happened. So, I mean, look at it as you will, but we'll go down the thing. So in the summer of 1943, in a Philadelphia naval shipyard, there was a test of a cloaking, or an invisible ship, rather. Now invisible to radar, invisible to the naked eye, or both. Still undetermined, but they had said that now there's not a lot of evidence for this either, that Einstein was working with the Navy at the time. Definitely no links to an actual Philadelphia experiment, but you can pound search that there was some things that he was doing with the Navy. So they said that he had his hand in this. Was unified field theory was basically, I guess, the foundation for this Philadelphia experiment, which, I mean, Einstein does talk about, and at the timing it would have been right. It doesn't have any specific links, but it would make sense due to, you know, another rumor that a Tesla coil was found on this ship. And that was what, you know, obviously, if anybody knows Nikola Tesla, we still have to do an episode on him.
Right.
But he's, you know, basically the guy of energy, creating free energy. And if you can, you know, basically intensify this energy onto an experiment, there's, I mean, I don't know, there's countless possibilities to me. I mean, if you're adding free energy and there's really no limit, and then you have the experiment and the theories of people like Albert Einstein and von Neumann, which is a mathematician that was also involved in this supposedly, which also researched Nikola Tesla's work. I think that there's really just like a limitless part of opportunity of weird things to happen, or shit that we didn't even know what it was going to happen, or we just were just, well, I guess, you know, an experiment. But even if you had like an idea, I mean, you don't really know until you fucking fully charge this bad boy and then, you know, do a process and fucking knows. Now, another thing with Philadelphia, I can't remember his name. I think it's Redfern, Nick Redfern. I want to, you can pound search that. Don't quote me on that, but he does a whole thing on rituals and talks about in Philadelphia, the energy ley lines that lie in Philadelphia. That's why the Independence Hall, all that stuff, and signing of the Constitution or whatever, all that happened there because, and Benjamin Franklin with the kite, all that shit happened in Philadelphia because of the energy ley lines, which would make sense why they tried this experiment in Philadelphia. And then there's actually, I think Ole talked about it too, didn't he? He did, on the river that goes up to Ole Demigard. Also, pound search him if you haven't heard about him or listened to any of the ones. You can go back into our previous topics. Ole Demigard is a friend of the show, great man. We definitely need to talk to him again soon with you guys. But anyway, so in this Philadelphia shipyard, they were going to test this. Witnesses say that there was a green glowing. Now, again, this didn't particularly come from that Carlos Allenda's documentation or letters that I could find. This was just witnesses,
Right?
So in general, but they had said that there was a green glowing of an aura on this ship. Now, this is where a part gets into where I'm like, all right, how did this story build these branches? Because so in the letters, it talked about they were going to do this experiment from Carlos, and then he goes into the details of the experiment. But then you have witnesses saying that there was this green aura and this glow to the ship, which, okay, so they had to be doing something. Somebody had to see this. There's also accounts of people at a bar that got in a fight that were like basically phasing in and out of reality. And so I don't know where, basically they never said anything to any, so that story came out, but they never elaborated on any of the witnesses. So either they were silenced or they didn't even get their testimony on what they saw. So I thought that was weird. And then they had said in the first experiment, it was on an empty ship on the Uss Eldridge. It was empty, and that it disappeared and came back. And then the second time they had got a skeleton crew on how the story goes. to basically fill in the just basic operations of the ship. But I would imagine that that conversation went like this. You go and find some naval seamen. But and we'll get it. Yeah, I go ahead and get there because they're coming. Jokes are coming on that.
Naval seaman.
They're coming.
Blah, blah, blah.
But anyway, so I would imagine that the conversation went something like, you know, we go and find individuals that don't have a family and that are low on money, and you say, hey, we need to run this experiment. We'll give you a bonus. Why don't you show up whatever, whatever. Show up at this time in this naval shipyard, and we're going to run this experiment. You'll get a bonus, which they should probably elaborate.
Like an infomercial, though. Also, they've done that where they've shown a product to people, and it was like a joke sort of thing, but they showed a product that broke, and then offered the audience like $20 a piece to give a good testimonial about it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, this is the best thing ever. Oh, would you let your kid use it? Oh, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that if the conversation went that way, there was no like elaborating, like, hey, we've never done this. There's possibilities of some crazy shit.
Right.
It's probably just like, hey, we're going to give you an extra fucking 10 grand to be the skeleton crew on this ship.
Yeah.
And that would be like, anybody that needs money is probably not going to ask questions because they probably would trust the government that they signed up for. But either way, I mean, it's still essentially their choice, I suppose, if that was how the conversation went.
But then once they, go ahead and continue.
Well, I was going to say,
it gets kind of grim here shortly.
Yeah, I was going to say it takes a fucking weird turn for sure.
Sideways turn
in the story. Now, this is the thing is like, so like in the bar fight that supposedly happened afterwards, well, let's get to the experiment, because then afterwards we'll jump into that a little bit. So then again, another branch of the story, which I find weird, because where would you get the information? Like, where would that detail come into play? Because they had said that in somebody's testimony that when this ship disappeared, it reappeared in a Virginia naval shipyard.
Yep.
And so it's like, okay,
and it was reported in that Virginia naval shipyard.
So where would that detail come from?
Well,
I mean, like, you know, if somebody's saying this is a made up story, why would it be a certain shipyard? Like, why wouldn't they, like, it could be anywhere? You could just start, why it showed up in the San Diego shipyard.
There's a lot of reasons you could speculate, but who reported it?
Yeah.
In the naval shipyard in Virginia, and what is their relationship?
Yeah.
To anyone.
Well, and see, and that's the thing. And that's another thing is like, they were never really.
They didn't really give you names or like.
They never tracked down these people and got full testimony.
Right.
So either they weren't allowed to by the military,
or I work at this naval shipyard and you work at this one and you reported seeing it, and then poof, it disappears. And guess what? It's right back. Yeah.
And so that Carlos, he is actually he is a merchant marine, and he was actually on post in the Philadelphia shipyard, and he witnessed it himself based on his account. But and again, it also takes a weird road later on in that story. There's a guy, can't remember. I want to say his name is Jessup or something, which ends up being a journalist or some bullshit. I don't know. But again, it's like muddy in the waters, cloudy and everything up. So he goes in, this Carlos Alienda or whatever, finds out that it's actually Carl Allen or some bullshit name. And he said, like, it was just like a cover name. He went and found him, then realized that this guy lived in his same hometown, and then went to this guy's house to ask him what happened. And then the guy ended up talking to the dad that he already knew because they went to school together. And the dad said, sure, go up and look in this guy's room, at this Carl Allen's room. And it had stuff about the Philadelphia experiment and letters that he wrote. And it just got to the point, like, so the guy that went to research ends up decoding a name when he goes to find this Carlos Alienda, and it ends up being a Carl Allen that lived in the same town, that went to the same high school, He talks to the dad,
Jeez.
and then it kind of gets debunked. I'm like, that doesn't even, I mean, that would be the odds of that would be
Right.
crazier than the odds of them doing this experiment, and it worked. So I just, that part of the shit bothers me. So then anyway, before we get down to some of the shit with Jessup, because he's a journalist, author, and but we'll get to that part. In 1984, there was a film that was done about this, which I recommend. I actually have it. I watched it. It's a very interesting film because, again, where did all this information come from? Because this was not, I mean, if you look up the stories from what was told and what has passed down, the information becomes very similar, even like in the story, in the movie. Like, I know you try to base it on the story, obviously, but like even this Al Bielek, which if you research Al Bielek, he's a very well-known individual. He's been on a lot of UFO conferences. He was some kind of officer in either the Marines or the Navy. And he said, and this was later on, he had to have regression therapy that brought him into the full story. But he said that 1984 film is what actually triggered his memories of this happening, and then went back and started reliving that and went to regression therapy, and then started finding out more information, which led him into a more documented and more evidence kind of project, which was the Montauk Project, another experimental military bullshit thing that had went array and kind of just fucking got, which we're gonna have to do a topic on that one too, because that one's pretty damn wild. But those are all pretty crazy coincidences that Al Bielek ends up being in that project as well. And then he had said he must have been brainwashed or wiped, because he didn't remember this until these images in the story triggered the whole entire memory. Then the regression realized that he was in other projects. And then you get into like, that part's not that's not that crazy of a stretch for me, because the military has been trying crazy shit, remote viewing, MK Ultra. I mean, the fucking list goes on. So the fact that this started in the 40s and they were kind of on, new things, trying out new things, and it only got crazier in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then documentation of the, MK Ultra, which was a brainwashing program, mind control program. It's like, that doesn't seem crazy to me. Like, everybody's like, oh, that's a far fetched. But if we didn't have proof of MK Ultra happening, that would be a fucking wild story. But there's proof, and people have came out and said that we were dabbling in mind control with kids and fucking military personnel, and trying to create super soldiers and secret agents that were cued by certain phrases or memories or images. So it's like, we would have been studying that way before we even got to that point. So it's not that fucking far of a stretch. I don't know, these people that I've listened to that do conspiracy podcasts and shit like that, like, I don't even know why they do it. Because I mean, like, you should be a skeptic, but to a point. Like, the government has done this shit, and we've even got to the point of proof that they've done some of it. So it's like, and then you add up all the stories and all the other things, like, something happened. To what extent? Sure. But they definitely, it's not like it just didn't happen. This is my point. Like, something happened. They definitely tried this shit out. They've definitely been experimenting with things. And why wouldn't you? I mean, if you were a controlling elite government and you had resources, money, and brilliance, and the smartest minds in the world, and use technology that has been discovered in the past to fucking find new shit in the future, like, that's what you do. So the fact that it just didn't happen is weird to me, that you would even be like, yeah, I just don't buy into it at all. Like, I don't see that. Like, I see our government trying everything possible: time travel, mind manipulation, remote viewing. I mean, and all these things. There's plenty of documentation on most of it that leads up to that they're definitely trying, now whether to what extent again is, can't be fact, but on speculation, it definitely looks pretty suspicious. And I don't know. I think that a lot of the people I heard weigh in on this that completely rule everything out, that's pretty naive to me.
Oh, at its finest.
So anyway, and again, we were at this Al Bielek, which he is a very, very interesting individual. I don't know what to think, because there's some things that I'm like, fuck, man, I can't even wrap my mind around it. He has a 5-hour, I don't know if it was on YouTube at one time. I don't know if it is now or not, but Al Bielek has a 5-hour talk about his regression therapy, things he's went through in his life, the different experiments he's been in the military. And I mean, like, some of it, you want to call him a liar because you're like, that's fucking the craziest shit I've ever heard. Now, to me, I'm more interested in the possibility of any of it being true. Just expands my thought process to being like, all right, I got to at least be open to the fact that the government's willing to go this far and that these things are possible. Because in a world that I think anything's possible, with the right resources and intellect and technology, I don't know what isn't possible. But so anyway, his story goes into some crazy stuff. You should pound search it. It's a very fun story to listen to. If anything, just opens your mind to just kind of, being more open instead of closed off, that the military is capable of a lot of shit. But anyway, he talks about, in one part, he actually talks about that in this Philadelphia experiment, the ship was actually transferred in a ripple of time. So like kind of like tore open in space and time. And the boat had went through that and then ended up in like 1987, 2348, or at least like he did. The boat went into 1987, I think. And then because him and another guy, and I think his name's Duncan something, pound search that as well. But in the story, they were brothers or stepbrothers, or they were, I don't know, military brothers or something. But they both had jumped off of the bow of the ship when this thing, because it was like the energy was going so crazy and everything was ramping up to like basically static charging this bad boy, to that they, everybody got panicked. And then these two,
wouldn't you?
Yeah. So these two jumped off to go into, the shipyard itself, into the bay. And the story, I don't really remember the whole story from him, but he said it goes through different parts of time. But I think he actually went through different parts of time. So in 1987, the ship went somewhere. But when he jumped off, he also jumped into that time-space rip and fell to 2348. And then he said he goes even farther to 2739. And these are the years, by the way, into the future. And then he says in 2739, he comes across this floating cities. And this is just a brief recap of something I listened to about 10 years ago, or maybe 7 years ago, something like that. But he had ended up in 2739, and it was like, floating cities, and there was like transportation of trains that like I think there was still a ground level, but there was like all the major cities were anti-gravity, floating, whatever else. And he came across like the government at the time, which was, he claims, a more liberal government with socialism, and people that had a little bit more important jobs got to have a little bit more nicer things. But basically, like, it wasn't monetary system for the most part. You got everything you needed to survive. And that this government had talked to him and asked him how he got there. And then he had talked about the experiment that they were running, and the government actually took him in and gave him a job until they could find a way to get him back. And he became a tourist guide of these floating cities for like 2 years, and lived in this 2739 for like 2 years. I mean, and then he had said, like, they had talked a little bit about how the system worked, and that the system at the time in the future was not, as far as political, was not made, decisions weren't made by human beings because human beings are on emotion and whatever else. That in the future there was a, I think he claimed a crystal, a live crystal that was from outer space, that was a biological crystal, maybe with no emotion and only logic. And then that was basically how the majority of the decisions were made in this futuristic, liberal, socialist world where everybody shared everything. And I mean, it gets crazy, and I ain't gonna lie. It's that part does sound like
it spirals a little bit.
Yeah, and it definitely sounds like, you know, a fictional book or something that you would want it to be. I mean, I don't know. Personally, I think that, you know, I'm not going to go to communism, but there has to be socialism in order for all this to work. Like, if we all look at each other, so in the future, like in a more evolved, and maybe decisions made by something that's not emotional and human, it would make sense that we live in a social world to an extent, because if we don't look out for one another and work together, there's no way it works. I think capitalism's good to an extent too, but you know, in the part that we're at, we've seen that go pretty much astray. It's an oligarchy now, and if you don't know those words, you should really look them up if you try to make debates, because that also makes me a little upset when people are like, "Oh, socialism, all communists." Like, those are very different things. They can lead into one another, but they're very different things. And capitalism, oligarchies, dictatorships, all lead into one another as well. So, I mean, take it as you will, but I think that's part of like how they divide. So I think that's important, is learn words and the way that and then this kind of veers off just a tad, but all in together. I mean, we have to work together. And so, like, if you look at this futuristic world, I think that might be just, you know, if it really happened, then yeah. Otherwise, it might be just something that is a wish, I guess.
Right.
That the world ends up being like that. But anyway, like I said, it definitely gets weird, because Al Bielik's story, I guess he is proven to be in the military. And then he later on, I think, is on documents of the Montauk Project. We're going to get into that one, so I don't have a lot of the details. But it becomes weird that he's on both these weird experiments that lead into time travel, mind or dimension manipulation. So it's all kind of weird. But his story definitely takes it to the limits. But there's a lot of people that, you know, verify. I mean, I think even Phil Schneider, which rest in peace to Phil Schneider, was one of the biggest whistleblowers ever be known. Pound search him as well. He's one of the biggest whistleblowers ever be known on the UFO topic. He talks about Al Bielik and believes in the things that he says. And they were also on UFO conferences together. And so, I don't know, man, you put some of these people together and you're like, they all have the credentials. And it's like, I mean, to what extent are they making a story up to get fame? Or to what extent is some of this true? Like, I don't know. But it definitely becomes weird when the names start piling up, the credentials start piling up. They all vouch for it. They're all whistleblowers. They've all been trying to be silenced. They've all been tried to be killed. Phil Schneider was killed. He had 13 attempts on his life in the last year that he lived. So it's like, you know, if they're just full of shit, then why are they, you know, trying to be killed? So, and that leads us in
whistleblower. Like, I don't understand how.
Yeah.
Like, how are you able? Like, I don't really understand the whole. Like, it doesn't really make sense if they're not going to be disappeared. Almost like if you're a whistleblower and you're exposing this.
Yeah.
Like, if I personally don't think that I could blow the whistle on a top secret government experiment.
Well, you would think that they'd be instantly after you.
Well, beyond even that, like, yeah. Like, they're literally going to, like, aside from just like, what was the guy that exposed like the DEA or the drug ring deal? Like,
well, and like Oli said,
suicide, 2 shots to the back of the head, but it was a suicide.
Or the director of the Department of Defense that jumped off that 8-story building in the hospital, said he went crazy.
Right.
But then another one happened the same way later on. So
Just going crazy.
and like Oli said, I think that's a good point though too, is like some of these people like throw themselves into the public to where it's like, hey, if I die,
if
you know
something
why.
happens, but
So it's almost like at that point
even
they're
when
like,
they
fuck.
do that though, like they said, the guy that exposed the FBI thing with the CIA when the CIA was bringing in the cocaine.
Oh yeah.
Like he killed himself with 2 shots to the back of the head.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it
clearly
never
not
goes any
possible.
farther than that. Like
Right.
it's so
who's
that
gonna investigate the government? The government?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and so like even that other defense director that was found in the river, and they
Right. Yeah.
and it's like, okay, so nobody's gonna go farther on that. Like,
Nah.
and I know like we go into some of these movies, you know, like the Manchurian Candidate and
Yeah.
shit like that. Like, but I don't think that that's that far stretched. I think that those movies are.
Why is that a far stretch at all? Like I think that karmatic reach are like
I was gonna say if we talk about like
why would Manchurian Candidate be a stretch? You're talking about mind control. Like
that we've done
MK Ultra type shit.
Yeah.
Like absolutely.
Well, and I mean, even like the Red Sparrow, they talk about, you know, like these secret agents that really did happen. Like, you know, like the weird shit, you know, conning people with sex and doing all like
honey potting and honey potting and shit like that.
And then fucking killing these people as double agent. Like this shit happens. Like I'm pretty sure that that's not all just fictional shit that we've made up.
It's
like
not just made for movies where the information came from reality.
Yeah. So it's like some of this stuff, like, you know, journalists looking into things. And this is where we get into the Jessup. So the guy, again, he was a little weird from the stories, you know, and things. But in 1959, he brought this story back up after Carlos Allende's letters that basically the letters described the experiment and the witnesses and what he had actually watched from the post. But anyway, he had sent this Jessup, Pound Search him, the journalist, author guy, had wrote books on it. And then, so I think they try to discredit him at the end because he was supposed to meet a guy, which has, this guy, by the way, has a fucking really cool name, but he was supposed to meet a guy named Manson Valentine. Which
my name is Valentine.
I think that name's pretty cool.
Manson Valentine.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like to me like an old Western guy or something.
Manson Valentine.
Manson Valentine. But anyway, he goes to meet this Manson Valentine, which was supposed to give him really big news and a really big story on the Philadelphia experiment, this topic. But instead, that day that he was going to go meet him, he decided to commit suicide and was found dead.
Of course he did.
In his garage.
Of course he was.
From the exhaust on his car with a hose leading to the window. Now, this is, and so they discredit him because he was divorced just right before that and his books were failing. Okay, so your books are failing. You might have been divorced because you're putting so much time and effort into finding this topic, which that happens all the time. Police get divorced because of their cases and everything else. So that's not a crazy thing to me. The depression part, maybe it did set in. Maybe his books weren't doing as good, but he was going to find this one that hit the next one. I get depressed on some of the things that don't work out for me, but that doesn't mean I quit. I just keep going to find the one that works, you know?
Not
so anyway,
has that same drive.
Yeah. And so then this guy has a meeting with a story that was supposed to be huge about the Philadelphia experience. And then he decides to give up that day. Come on now. It's just like, you know, and that's the part we get into, like, he killed off right before he gets, you know, the biggest break of his story that he's working on. Like, because he decided, I'm not going to go today. I'm just going to kill myself in my garage. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
So I don't know. That part says a lot. Also, it gives more credence to, again, the cover up and the extent the government's probably going or willing to go to cover this shit up. Because I think of it like this, like if you are a government and let's just say that hypothetically you're just doing experiments in general and one of them you can't really do completely in the privacy because it's a massive fucking battleship. So you're doing it in a shipyard and then some things actually happen where people see it. Now, we didn't even get into the point of the return of this ship had literally semen fused
Semen,
onto the hull of the boat. Now,
not that type of semen.
yeah, not
All
so a
over the
load of
boat.
semen on the hull of the boat. But I think
But
that
yeah,
we could,
the sailors were in the walls,
yeah,
like fused.
yeah, like
Some were
arms
fused,
hanging
like,
out
through the wall,
of the metal.
like inside of the wall, outside of the wall, because of the time travel. Like basically the
Yeah.
organic matter.
Or they miscalculated something of the time travel to where it,
They were
yeah,
off a step.
yeah, like
Right.
it, like maybe just altered the biological on the ship. So the ship came back whole, but all of the biological chemicals of the makeup of the body
a lot have died from
infused. Yeah.
suspicious illness.
Yeah.
A lot have went crazy.
A lot of, yeah, I was going to say there was a lot of stories of headaches,
Yep.
sickness,
Tons of like
going
flu-like
crazy.
symptoms for months.
Yeah. And then there was also the story of like the people that after went to that bar that was by this naval shipyard and got in a fight, and literally like the people that were witnessing this fight, like the people in the fight from the ship were literally like hazing out of existence and back into existence. So I think the calculations might have, but anyway, which leads me to say, like, if you're trying any experiment whatsoever and some things leak out that you even possibly did something that was like, you know, not even on what you thought might happen. Like, we just wanted to create a cloaking device.
Right.
And all of a sudden we ripped a time space or a gap in time space and fell through it and came back and literally fused people into the boat. Like, you're not going to let that information be out. Like, cause
You're not going to throw the information in the front page of the paper.
Well, that, and you're not going to want, like, you know, the Russians to get a hold of like, okay, now we better try to come up with a Tesla coil and try to recreate at least like, you know, the unified theory of Einstein and like recreate some of these experiments so that they can get that technology. Like, you're not going to want that out anywhere for your own purposes in military and for, you know, the public, and the fact that you even did this to people that you are your employees. So there's all kinds of reasons why you wouldn't want to get this out, and you'd spend every resource you had to cover it up, in my opinion. Like, there's just, but yeah, like there was people, you know, hanging halfway out of the boat and stuff. Now this boat did get used later on, which I thought, what do you do? Just fucking scrape these people off of it? Scrape the semen off the side and then just
It's never a good day when you have to scrape semen off the walls.
And I think we can agree that the parallels, if you have any ship, any naval ship that is majority male, you're going to have a ton of semen on it. On the ton of semen on the hull. You're going to have a ton of semen on the side of the boat for sure.
On the hulls?
Yeah, everywhere.
Or on the hulls?
The hulls, the hull,
the
ceiling, the chair.
So bad. So real back to your question though. Seriously, it's if you have these naval heads,
the naval seamen,
they're being fused with the ship.
Yeah.
So like, even if I like cut you off. Like if my arm's coming out of the wall,
that
we cut it off, so it's a hallway now, right? So is my shoulder just now like flush with the wall?
That was actually my thought too, because when I was trying to think about this in my own head, I was like, would that make like the more dominant particles, metal, be what's behind, but you're fused into it? So if you like scrape it off, it's just metal. Or if you scraped it off, it's the rest of your body, because they were saying,
is the metal like formed around you?
That's what I was
thinking.
thinking.
Like, did the metal cut you off? But if it did cut you off,
but they were saying like, I was gonna say like,
where's the other part?
So you got legs hanging out in the hallway, and then like,
right, but what's that leg attached to? Is it just, it's not flush up against the metal?
Yeah, and the thing is, like,
it would have to be through the metal.
Yeah, and I don't know that if these people were alive when they came back, but that would be even fucking more bizarre.
Wish there was videotape back then.
You know? Yeah,
we would never see the tape anyway, but
yeah,
that would be a definite sight to see. Like,
yeah, like, well, there's I won't give the podcast, but they had a pretty good take on it. They had Bulkhead Bill So
Bulkhead
they were
Bill.
talking about like he's just a part of the ship now, and it was actually pretty funny. So I was thinking of different things that we could have probably used and branched off, but I'm not gonna take theirs because it was too good. It was too original. But you could do like steamhead Steve and all different parts of the boat. But that would be weird because I wonder if like they came back like when it because it if you're looking at time space, let's just go hypothetically here, and you rip a gap in this because like this electrical charge, which let's just basically like energizing this ship to a point of just massive overload of energy, and then just basically rips a gap in time space. It falls in and reappears like from the from the understanding it was pretty fast as far as the reappear, but when you leave it could be any amount of time. So like to you, if you went through the gap, you could be gone for 50 years and you come back in seconds.
Right.
So like,
wouldn't that make
so that would lead me to think if you were infused, that you would be alive at least when you got right back. Well, I guess maybe. Well, I guess if you got infused when you left, no. But like if it like on the re-entry of this timeline is how you got infused, then you would be alive just for a second at least.
You would imagine so.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions, and then, again, it'll puzzle you. But so in the movie, that Al Bielek also says that that what triggered his memories. He said that film in 1984, which I actually really liked the film, but a lot of people said it was pretty cheesy. Which I guess like in 1984, I mean, everything kind of was. I mean, but it was good then. Like even Back to the Future, like if you look at it now, it's like, yeah, okay, in a DeLorean with fucking going 88 miles an hour, like I don't know, but it's the same kind of thing, kind of same effects. They're not fucking 2021 CGI, but I like the story, and Al Bielek says that it was very, very accurate, is why it triggered those memories. So again, you should watch that. If you haven't seen it, it's just interesting nonetheless. And somebody went through the time to make a film about it because the stories had lasted so long. There was a lot of other things that I heard of people that weigh in on the topic that had said, well, why did it take so long to come out with the movie? Well, I'm guessing that it would be just like, some of the other things, which are some of these older people that were in the experiment were at their deathbed at the time of saying, I got to let people know that this happened because there's no documentation, enough evidence. So they tell their story before they pass away when they're not going to be, court-martialed or killed. And then this story, starts gaining ground from, individuals that have criteria that is legit. Because I'm guessing that that's kind of how that plays out. Now, I mean, like, there's certain things like in the Roswell, whatever else, 1947, like, same time frame, but there was stories of that day saying, but they also fucked up because it was harder to cover up because they put it in the paper, like in Roswell. So, and then the nurses and everything else were interviewed, like fully interviewed. So it's kind of hard to cover all that up. Like as far as this goes, there was nothing documented. There was no, investigations of witnesses, and there was nothing put in the paper. There was nothing put on documentation. So, I can see where the difference is made. But yeah, it becomes definitely strange because then you got time travel involved in all of this dimensional manipulation, which I really don't think, based on how the story plays out, I don't think they knew what there was going to happen. I think that they might have hoped for a cloaking, but I guarantee with the smartest minds, they were like, if we put this much energy into the atmosphere or whatever, and with physical matter, we literally could do a lot of harm. And people were like, fuck it, let's try it anyway. Because I mean, if you have a full crew on a ship that you're literally like basically charging to the point of you have no idea what's going to happen. That's pretty fucking dangerous. So to me, it's like, I don't think that they really gave a fuck about the outcome. They were just like, let's try it, see what goes. And you know, in the movie, I don't know where this part of the story comes from either, but in the movie, they end up in some base in New Mexico or something. And that in the base in New Mexico was 40 years later.
Right.
And then he like basically escapes the base, goes back out, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. And he was in a hospital bed. And then what or something when then he comes back to, starts finding all his shit out, and goes back to the base in New Mexico to get back into this RIP, which would mean that they're still doing that 40 years later. Now in the story, it says that they had to do it based on timing, that it was the only time that they could do this was every 40 years. But I would have to say that I don't know if I believe that part, because I think
cinematic.
Yeah, that part sounds cinematic, because I'm thinking like, I think the energy lines are just energy lines, even like Stargates, which we're going to do a thing on like that. I don't think they had times when they worked. I think they just always worked. But Stargates is going to be a fun one too.
It's kind of funny now that you put it in those words, like when you articulate it, because we're really discussing on whether or not a time traveling device works on a schedule.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
We're bending time and space, but you have to show up by between 9 and 5.
Yeah. On that day.
On Tuesday, October 13th. Like, yeah,
that part does seem weird to me.
That sounds cinematic.
But this is where I don't get where that part of the story comes from, because so I was curious about the base. I couldn't find much about it, like in any kind of topic of anywhere, but I was thinking like, okay, so you end up in a base 40 years later that would have had to be doing the same experiment 40 years later in order to go back the other way.
Right. Because otherwise, like, what if that lab sold out to and it was an airplane hangar? And like you traveled to like what if it wasn't there anymore? Like
and I would have
that's like that would be like a Stargate sort of thing where you'd have to travel point to point.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that if you come into Stargates, which we're gonna have to do a topic on Stargates, because there's a lot of information on Stargates. And the thing is, that leads into this too. If you're saying that the Philadelphia experiment isn't possible and that's just crazy nonsense, then you'd have to say that all of the shit about Stargates is all nonsense. And there's a ton. And ancient cultures have talked about them. Many, almost all.
Yeah.
And everything else with Stargates, even into current times and portals, like you'd have to say all that's fake and not possible, which again, we don't know what's possible in this reality. And I personally think with any resources, with enough resources, enough technology, and enough brilliant minds thinking on the same thing, I don't know what's not possible.
I agree. I concur.
So, but yeah, so like on this, I think what's more likely though, on the cinematic part being every 40 years, I think the more likely to me on that whole part is that in 1940, whatever this was, 1943, they did this and
that's when the movie was made, right? In 83?
Well, the movie is, I think 87 or 80 something, 84.
40 years after that was like the actual experiment.
Yeah.
That's why it's a 40-year gap.
Yeah. And
of course it's every 40 years because it's just now coming back.
Yeah. And I think that if there was any relation to the year, maybe like the year when he did research, or the year that's
cinematic.
Well, I was thinking this. So in the year that maybe this base had some weird event happen, it seems more likely to me that in 1943 this happened and they were like, oh fuck, man, I didn't know we could do this. Then started researching it, and to recreate it the proper way, it took 40 years.
Oh, for like the right temperature, the right day,
to send it back to the actual Philadelphia experiment. Now, I think that they time traveled other things, but it was all sporadic and everywhere else.
You're right. That's speculative. You're right.
So I think that it could have possibly been like, oh, now we can put this actual ship back in that time where it left. Well, it wouldn't have been the correct way because they were infused in the hull. So,
yeah,
I just think that maybe it was just or it was just like, hey, we've got to a point
No.
where we're going to try it again to this level. Maybe they were doing it in smaller, just sending one people back at times, or smaller things, not a full fucking battleship.
Right.
So I think maybe in 40 years, they were like, all right, now we're to the level we've sent people back, animals back, cars back, a fucking bicycle, fucking whatever shit. So now we're like, all right, let's try this battleship thing again. And then maybe sent it back, and then it's still fucked up and fused them into the hole. I don't know. When you look at time though, so the variation and the way you look at it's different from which end you're on. So if you're in the Philadelphia experiment, you might have never got that shit back had it not been for 1944 when they decided to try it again and send it the other way.
Right.
So it depends on what side you're looking at. And I don't think it has really anything to do with a certain time, but I think that it's just like maybe at that time they were ready to actually send something that big back through again. But in the Philadelphia experiment on that timeline in 1943, you could have just tried this experiment and it zipped through time, ripped a hole, and just disappeared forever. And they never tried to resend it. So it might have just never came back. So it just depends on which side you're looking of, which we're trying to make a lineal thing, which it's not. And that's the hard part about time and space, that once you take that away, a lineal like timeline, like it doesn't really make much sense anyway when you're trying to explain it, because it literally could just be in another dimension in the same time, but not visible, and then made it visible again in the same time. You know, there's all different kinds of ways to look at it. But again, I mean, when, we talk about time, and I think the most collective we've got on that is that the past, present, and future happen at the same time. So it never really went anywhere other than dimensional. But yeah, okay, I mind blew myself. So you start thinking about it, stuff like that. That's how I get into it. And I'm just like, fuck. And that's when I think, like, man, in this world, in this reality that we live in, this matrix, fuck, anything's possible. Speaking of which, we're very close to that date. The revealing of the new Matrix. I can't wait. Oh, man. I tell you, when that movie came out, I think that's kind of what started a lot of the gears for me. I mean, I always was that way, but then that movie was like, fuck, dude, why isn't this a possibility? And, I think a lot of movies are that way. We look at it as science fiction, but it's like, why isn't there a possibility of that?
But that's how they always sneak it. Remember what Oli was talking about? They put it in front of you. It's called science. Then they put in fiction.
Yeah.
So it's still science.
Well, I was going to say, even if you look at science fiction,
it might be that the story they're telling you in the movie is fiction.
Yeah.
But the science behind it.
Right. Well, I was
science.
going to say that goes into Star Trek. A lot of the shit that happened in that old show is now becoming reality. So it's like
weird.
Yeah. Weird how that happens, how they use the science of that. And it's now no longer fiction in some of it.
Right.
And I think that's going to happen more and more as we go along, just like any other thing, which would be like airplanes, cell phones, fuck everything you can fucking think of that's got modern technology was science fiction at one point. So, I don't know. I think that if people really like take that programming that they give us in this world out of your conscious and expand the thought of just possibility, that you can get beyond what we're capable of or what's possible, because it's like, you don't fucking know. You have no idea. And once you get past that, it's a lot easier just to be like, I think that, I'm willing to look into this because I don't know. Even the flat earth, I don't believe it. I don't believe flat earth is flat earth personally, but how the fuck do I know? I've never been outside this planet. I can't prove it one way or the other. So the people that are 100% set on that it's round or 100% set on it's flat, you're both wrong, because you can't prove it 100% either way. So until we can do that, just have an open debate and don't make anybody feel fucking bad or stupid for having a global discussion, which is what I think that's most important. hence the Lost Info podcast, the global discussion. Like it, talk about it. Yeah. If you don't agree, show some points on why you don't think so. And they're going to probably show some points why they think so. But either way, the discussion is the more important part, and the research and finding more answers is the more important part of the whole thing, other than saying you're wrong automatically to somebody on a topic that you have no way to prove. So I think that's the world that we live in, is that, you know, even in political stuff, like you take a stance and it's like, why? You don't, there's no reason yet to take that stance. The first thing we have to do, and I wish we had the money, is fucking do expeditions past Antarctica, past this ice wall, be able to fly in the no-fly zone over Antarctica. And now maybe it's not about flat Earth. Maybe it's about fucking alien bases.
Yeah,
but there's something. But
yeah,
let's find that something.
I was gonna say, yeah, that is for another day. Like Antarctica's
We're getting on that one for sure. We're gonna
need to definitely do Antarctica, because nothing about it makes sense.
No. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean
that it's something mysterious or something like, absolutely. And that's what the mind does. The mind finds the Mona Lisa in a potato chip because it needs to see an answer.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
We have to have something. And if the answer is you don't get an answer, well then it must be suspicious.
Well, and it is suspicious, but that doesn't mean that it's
mysterious. Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't mean that it's one individual thing. It could be multiple things. It could be all of them together.
Could be nothing.
Nothing.
It could be they don't want people there because they don't want them to disturb the ecosystem of whatever glaciers that we have left.
Yeah.
And
personally, I don't believe that.
That's the last of them.
Personally, I don't believe that, but it could be.
Maybe it is.
As far as again, that's my point, is that more research, and then, the fact that you have to have UN's approval to go past the 60th parallel. We should do that as a group of people that want answers, and go to this 300-foot fucking wall, or where they say the passages in the summer, and fucking go past it and see what the fuck's past there.
Yeah, what happened to the Area 51 raid?
Well, I know, but this is like,
oh, I'm saying you got to think about it like this.
But this isn't owned by anybody, so that shouldn't. Yeah, that should be allowed.
It's also how many thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away, and you got to get there by how?
Well, that's a
plane that you're not going to be able to refuel.
Well, and that's the thing that I find weird, is
you're not going to be able to refuel your plane.
Well, so like, they have bases on Antarctica.
Not that you can access as a.
Oh no! Yeah, no.
Yes.
Well, I was going to say more. Take a freight liner, because you can go all the way around the world on a freight liner, and then go down to where this passage is supposed to be opening up to this outer world, out past this fucking ice wall. I don't know.
It's a big ass.
Well, it is, but I think if you got enough people and enough, like,
I'm down if anybody can
make this happen. Yeah.
I'll be a stow.
Well, I was gonna say, if you
I'll stow away on a freight liner. No problem.
Absolutely. I was going to say,
accommodations.
If you had enough people that got like $1 billion together and went to the UN and said, hey, we want to do exploration and we'll get all the right permits. We just want to do a full investigation of nothing that's owned by anybody certain. We won't go in the no-fly zone. We'll just go to this place, this pass per se. And I find it weird that the UN has a flat earth map. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I don't know if that's to fuck with people or. So anyway, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but I mean, just more investigation. Obviously there's something important there because, in 2017, almost every leader, big leader, Putin, Buzz Aldrin, all kinds of people went down to Antarctica for something certain. Nobody really knows, but it's like something's there. So maybe it's just an ancient civilization that was under the ice that has never, been known to mankind, or maybe just the Nazi Germany when they went down there and hid under the ice. They were the first ones to find them. Who fucking knows? But that's the thing, is like, we need to, hold explorations or more research accountable, even the governments. You can't hide everything forever. I think we're at the point of, it won't destroy society. It'll just keep us more informed and we'll move on, because that was the biggest thing, was they had said that it would create chaos and fear. I think we're past that. I really do. I think in the world as we live in it now, we're past chaos and fear. Let's just give us some more answers, at least give us something. Yeah, if you want to hide some stuff back because of national security or whatever the fuck you want to say, sure, hold some back. But the full out cover up shit. We're past chaos and fear.
Right. No doubt.
So even on this, like, I think that, you know, the Philadelphia experiment, well, actually, you know what, let's just get it off the fence, because we're there now. So go ahead, Jacob, take it off the fence.
As for it, the time travel aspect of Philadelphia experiment, do I believe that they disappeared? Do I believe that they were no longer able to be captured by the naked eye? Those are different things. I believe that it was a radar jamming, early forms of radar jamming, similar to stealth bombers, things along those lines. There's a lot of science behind it that we don't know about. So as far as the time travel from Philadelphia to Virginia, in the wise words of Randy Jackson, it's gonna be a no for me, dog.
So you don't think that it went down like they say it did?
I do not believe it went down as they say.
Okay.
I do not believe, because like I think that the green light they saw was the St. Elmo's fire, where when you have the generator, then you have the particles like you're like heating up like a plasma sort of thing. And
plasma field.
That makes sense. But I think that was more of like a just because of the energy, but I don't think that.
So you're saying that you don't think it fell into actual?
I don't think that this. I don't think
time or existence.
I don't think that it went from one place to another or traveled through time.
Okay.
I do believe that it rendered itself invisible.
Okay.
I do believe that, but I think that is a finagle, if you will.
Okay. Do you believe in the people infused into the ship part? Well, kid Bill.
Two things. I do not think that they're fused
Steve.
into the ship so much as they can have been exposed to massive radiation.
Okay.
So massive radiation can do what? Can melt you, right?
I would assume. Yeah.
It can melt your body, right?
I would assume. Yeah.
So if you are a witness to the inside of this or wherever the ship is, like you could potentially see a blob of person melted into the ship, looking
that
infused.
That doesn't seem too far stretched. I mean, like I said, if you're putting that much energy into fucking steel and you're on it,
if you can see this green light emitting,
a
significant distance away, like that's a lot of energy.
And steel's a conductor, so
right.
And if you're on it,
so you're a microwave.
Yeah. So that part, yeah.
You know what I mean? So the infusion part,
that's definitely not out of the question.
That would be where I think that the infusion part would come in.
That would actually, that would be a good way to explain that, because it logically makes sense. So like, yeah, if you came back and you were like, people were infused in the hole, it wasn't like half in and half out. It was like a fucking glob melt.
Exactly. And that looks like if I throw this, ball of clay at the wall, you in your mind, there's the other rounded half of that ball. And I would say that the wall, you know what I mean?
And I would say that, that would also be, acute poison, radiation poisoning would kill people off fast. You'd have headaches, you'd have sickness.
You can go crazy. You'd have like all of the things.
So all those things listed, that is a possibility with that.
Right. Radiation poisoning.
Yeah. Okay. And then there was, what else was there that, okay. So what do you think about the guy that Jessup, that he died, that actually killed himself, or
that one is a tough one. If anybody that's a whistleblower that dies, suicide isn't suicide, in my opinion. Like it's just really weird that
too much crazy timing.
I'm gonna go blow the whistle and not be able to answer questions afterwards, and then I'm gonna kill myself like in the midst of that before I have the opportunity to what's the word I'm looking, like validate all of the claims that I'm making.
Yeah.
Like
I find it weird, because it's like it's always the people that are involved in a topic that quote unquote shouldn't be talked about,
right? And
then it's like, I'm just gonna commit suicide. Fuck it.
Yeah, like today's the day.
Yeah, that part does seem weird to me too. All right. Well,
how about you? What are you thinking?
My off the fence, I'm more of like when I think about things, I like to go to the extent of the craziest side of it because for me, I think it actually makes me feel more comfortable instead of having all these unanswered questions. That it's so crazy is why we can't have those answers because like in this podcast and everything else is like you're always searching and these topics are fun to talk about because you're always like, oh, there's just not enough answers. But I think it's so crazy and this reality is so wild that we're just not going to be privileged to have those answers probably till the day we die. So I think that it is on the craziest levels. And so, like I said, again, you know, my whole now, do I believe that it went through time? I don't know about time. Do I believe that it fell into a gap of like another dimension or time space? Yeah, I think something of like.
So you think it crossed planes?
Yeah.
From this reality and existence to
like
another,
like interdimensional travel, like we kind of, and maybe that's where
like
we
what's
started
happening in front of us or overlapping on top of us in a different dimension simultaneously.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that's where we got some of the inclination that we could actually do that, and we're trying to figure it out now.
Right.
So and experiments
which
lead
is
to
also
things.
with they're looking at like what was it, CERN? We'll go ahead and pound search our episode. Where they got a peek around the corner when they're seeing things. So it's.
And I think that experiments, especially at the drastic level of our military, and again, unlimited resources, brilliant people, and you know, money and everything else. Like, I don't think there's really a limit on what you could, accomplish. Now, did it work the way they wanted? Did they come out on the better end of the deal? I don't know. Probably not. But I think that, with Nikola Tesla's technology, and then you have, even with just the theory of Einstein and people like him, and you put that into some kind of experiment, who the fuck knows what could happen? Like you can literally, you can literally just fucking annihilate the whole shipyard, essentially. But it didn't. But I mean, you don't ever know. So I think like whatever they can gather on these little like experiments, they're not ever going to give up on it. Like if you know that you could even make it disappear, that wouldn't be the end of that experiment. Our government's going to take that one step farther every time. So
now what else can we disappear? Now how far can we make it disappear?
Yeah. Now, can we make it go somewhere? Can we make it come back?
Colonialization.
Yeah. So
we are that's literally what that is.
Yeah. And so I do believe
take over and continue.
Now this story, I will say, has a huge lack of evidence and documentation and things other than witnesses that are never interviewed and all that. But that being said, though, with that being said, and Al Bielik's story is pretty fucking wild. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know that I can buy all that. I want to. It sounds fun. It sounds cool. Again, I'll go to the extreme side just so that I can have some kind of peace with not having any answers ever, and just think about, well, what if that was possible? That just makes me feel like my mind's expanding into the realm of possibility. Obviously, I'll never know anyway, so I might as well just be on the whole spectrum's open to me.
Right.
But as far as them trying some crazy ass experiment and it going severely wrong and making it maybe in and out of dimension and actually literally fuse people into the hole and coming in and out of a dimension, I want to say that I'm on the side of I just think that our government tried too many crazy things in the past that out of this one, out of all of them, doesn't even seem that crazy because you're actually using real science, electricity.
Yeah, I just don't think they had it back then. I don't think they had it yet. Even the Nazis were still trying to fight. Remember the Nazi bell there?
Well, I was going to say, even a year before this, we were still in the Manhattan Project.
Right.
But then again, we were splitting atoms at that time. So like it was just the beginning, but we did it. So it's like, they were real, and we also Project Paperclip. We had a lot of these fucking really brilliant people that we took and put all together in one place. Like, there's a lot of shit that could have happened, and it did. So, we came up with the atomic weapon. That, we didn't know that the atoms wouldn't keep splitting upon each other. We didn't even know if there'd be a stop to that. Yet we still tried it, and we tried it on people at that.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know. It seems weird. and it seems far-fetched, but when we start looking at all the other things that lead into this and the people and the capabilities and that, again, the atomic weapon was being created at this time, and then we dropped it on people to try that out. Like, I don't know. I just don't think that there's a limit with what we'll do for
There's not
fucking,
much of a limit.
yeah. And so I think that the possibilities are there. I don't know that the extent of the story or the movie is there at all, but yeah, like maybe a quick glitch in time space and you're in a dimension, you're out of a dimension, you come back and the guy that was walking down the fucking side of the ship ended up being, in a wall because it glitched back at the wrong time. I don't know.
Right. So we that's what I mean, like about the warehouse things. Like, so if I shoot back to like whatever time I'm going to, like, what happens if that house that I was at got renovated by the time I get back, and now there's a countertop right there, and I just walk in and I'm like, I have a countertop halfway through my
and so like that part it makes me very curious.
Do I have to, like, because what they're saying is you're only transporting from one place to the exact same place in a different time.
Right. And so
I don't believe that's how time travel works.
Yeah, and I was thinking like on this, it might have been more like, I don't think it was time travel per se. I don't know that I want to believe Al Bielek's story in the time and the movie kind of timeline, but I don't know that the time travel, because I don't think that would have been like that. But I do think a glitch in space time and then it reappears real instant. And the guy that's out of place ends up being fucked.
Right. We need
I see
you, listeners. We need to do a poll.
Yeah.
And see what you all think.
The Lost Info Podcast at gmail.com.
Poll. Send us your answers. You send in either yes, that you believe that the time travel or the space-time continuum opened. However you want to say it. Or
if you just leave it at if you believe the Philadelphia experiment happened or not, and then the time travel or not.
Right.
And then maybe if you want to add your own conclusion on what you think, put that in there too.
Please, and we'll get back to you on
actually
what your viewers thought.
I will give a T-shirt
That's
to
what I was thinking about.
the best answer of somebody's conclusion
of why they think the way that they are thinking.
Yeah. Or any other thing that I missed that you wanted to add on some documentation or something. We're going to have to get into the Montauk Project too, because the Montauk Project, if people don't know about it, obviously it was basically a fucking crazy, but it was like you go into the upside down of this world, basically another dimension of this world. Stranger Things was based on it in a different sense, I guess.
As above, so below.
And they took a different spin on it, but that was based on the Montauk Project, which I never knew until just this last year or so. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So I'll have to go back and watch it. But I thought, man, that's weird because, again, the Montauk Project, I think that they were doing these experiments and then the Russians were also involved in this shit. And so then you get Al Bielek was supposedly involved in this, and it's about using the conscious to create a reality, which again, I know seems bizarre, but we do have to realize this reality is bizarre. And even the double
how bizarre
how bizarre. There's a clue for you. That's coming soon too. How bizarre. But then anyway, I mean, look into the double slit experiment. When particles observe, they act different. So again, conscious does predict how this reality interacts. So, I mean, call it what you will, but everything about this whole reality is crazy. That's why I don't think that anything's off the table.
I feel that.
But with that, we went down a lot of roads, a lot of avenues. The Philadelphia experiment, I think we're half and half.
Yeah, half and half. We're gonna
TLI denied. TLI denied and TLI approved. So we're half and half on that one.
We need to hear back from you, viewers, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, that way we can put a final stamp on it based on our viewers and fans. With that, also, I wanted to thank Hawaii. Fucking huge increase. I don't know where you guys came from, but on the Skinwalker Ranch, I mean, just crazy downloads. So appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks to everybody. We're not gonna leave anybody out, but
Aloha.
it was very, very huge increase in Hawaii. So thank our friends from the far west. With this case file, I don't think we're really gonna. We did a couple jokes during it. There's not really any
Not a whole lot.
specific jokes on the Philadelphia experiment. So I think with it, you got anything else to add?
Nah, the only Philadelphia experiment I know is whatever the hell the Eagles are calling their defense this year.
Oh,
Not all
I didn't
got.
even have the sounds ready for that one,
Shit.
but that one was nice. So we'll count that one. I give that one an 8. I like it because that was pretty good.
It's an original.
All I had was semen on the hull. So. And I tried to. I think I abused it a little bit.
You abused the Siemens Holt? What?
Yeah.
Whoa, whoa,
Whoa, hey, oh.
whoa.
Yeah.
You've gone too far.
So, but yeah, we're gonna go into the Montauk Project soon because I don't want this one to get too far away from each other, because that one has a lot, and it actually has a lot more documentation and whatever else. So if I find it really weird, and then and I don't know if you've looked into that at all.
Not in depth, but we will definitely get on the research.
I'll wait on that because I want to see, like, but yeah, you'll find it pretty interesting when you get into that
Absolutely.
one. And it has a lot of interesting characters, and then a lot of people from the military, and a lot of whistleblowers in that one that actually make that one even more credible, but also link back to this one with some of the people and some of mind and dimension and manipulation and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be fun. Hopefully we'll be in the new studio here soon in the next couple episodes. I will be doing a project that I want to bring to you guys that I've been waiting on, and I'm hoping it'll be done on the next episode. And hopefully when we're in the new studio, I'll break this project. It's going to be fun, but we're going to need your guys' help to get it to the right people.
Stay tuned.
And it should be a lot of fun. With that being said, this is Keeping You Awake, Jake
and Jake
on the Lost Info Podcast. And this cave file is closed. We're out. Peace.